เมื่อมองดูนกพกพินบินลับไปเมื่อมองสายชนถึงไหลริน
There was no pressure on lines. There was no pressure on points. In fact, it looked like they just came and sat with the person on the mat. Now, over time, I realized it almost didn't matter what was wrong with the person. Bad back, same thing. Headache, same thing. Gut dysbiosis, upset stomach, same thing. Diarrhea, same thing. And I went to Pakru and I was like, what's the deal? I got to do 10,000 things. You got me leaping over people and running around and picking them up and throwing them around and what. And then I watch Pichet over here work, and he goes over, takes a breath, sits down next to him for a minute, and then everybody says thank you, and he goes on. How can he do that? And that's therapy, but I got to do all this leaping about. Lifting and pulling and pushing and struggling and adjusting and correcting and poking and prodding and my clients crying and writhing and it's like a wrestling match. My sessions look like a wrestling match. Pichet, Kru Pichet, Ajahn Pichet sessions look like, Om. I said, why isn't he doing everything? They had back pain. Why didn't they do the corrections? Why didn't they do the spinal rotation? Why didn't they do the back bend? Why didn't they do the forward bend? Why didn't they do the point release on the arms? Why didn't they do the reflexology on the feet? The freaking reason you go see, I shouldn't say that. That's one in the jar. I shouldn't say freaking and Buddha in the same sentence. The Emerald Buddha is the reclining Buddha. Emerald Buddha is the most sought after tourist experience. Number 2 is a reclining Buddha at Wat Po. The reason you go see the reclining Buddha at Wat Po is because the world's oldest and the world's largest ancient reflexology chart is on the bottom of the Buddha's feet. That's why you go there. That's what you go to see. The first time I went there, nobody else was there. That tells you how long ago that was. And Pakru Samai took me and explained the chart to me on the bottom of the Buddha's feet. And that's how I had my first lesson in reflexology, standing at the feet of the Buddha, literally at the feet of the Buddha, okay? So I'm looking at Ajahn Pichet. He's not doing the reflexology. He's not working all the points. He's not doing the 6 points, the 5 lines, the 4 points, the 3 arch points. He's not doing that. And Parker laughed. He laughed at me a lot. Something we had in common. I laughed at me. He laughed at me. We had that in common. Get it? So he goes, the most important part of a healing treatment session, Ayurvedic protocol, is puja. Because healing, see, love is everywhere, which means healing is everywhere. There is nowhere that healing is not. It cannot be, by definition, in the world and not be near adjacent to love as a possibility. Healing is a practical expression of love. That's what healing is. All healing is an expression of love. So therefore, healing is not about the therapist or the doctor or the practitioner. You can't heal me. You can't heal me. You can't heal me. You can't heal me. Why? Healing is something that I receive from God. Healing is something that's about my life manifesto agreement between me incarnated in this life and Great Spirit. And the therapist, the doctor, the so-called healer is a facilitator. A facilitator. Just like if you drink a soda through a straw, how concerned are you really with the straw? The straw is an intermediary. All you're trying to do is get the juice. Just trying to get the juice. That's the only reason I'm using a straw. You're trying to get the juice. Okay? So you don't really care about the straw. The straw is a tool. The straw is an intermediary. The straw is a vehicle. The straw is a circuit of capacitance. That's what the straw is. And I, in respect to bringing healing to you, am the straw. I'm not that which moves through the straw. I'm not the source of that which moves through the straw. And I am not the destination of that which moves through the straw. And so, ultimately, the idea is that healing is a matter of agreement with Spirit. You need healing, you ask for healing, Spirit agrees to heal you, and then everything else is window dressing. And in fact, one teacher told me it this way: that everything that we do on the matter table is a placeholder, is to occupy the mental attention of the ego long enough for the healing to manifest. In other words, really my job, facilitating you through yoga postures, in a way, is to gather your attention in a certain way, to gather resources in a certain way, and then sort of distract you from the real process of healing, which has nothing to do with how you sit or stand. Okay? Has nothing to do with pressure. How hard do you have to push to create a healing effect? Well, technically you don't even have to touch a client to create a healing effect. So pressure is not important at all. Deep tissue is a ridiculous misnomer. It's ridiculous. Even though I'll use the term sometimes, but from a point of view of actual practice, do I need to put deep pressure on someone to get them to encourage them into a healing reaction or response? And the absolute answer is no. And the old people in Thailand taught me that you hardly have to touch a person, that in fact all you have to do is be with them in the right way. That in fact that is what a real doctor is, a real therapist is not a fixer-upper. A real doctor may be mechanically inclined, but there are no mechanics in healing. There is no knob that you can turn. There is no joint that you can lever. There is no handle that you can push or pull that will guarantee that a healing effect occurs. Not possible. There are intrinsics. There are elemental, energetic, emotional, spiritual, mental factors in all healing that cannot be quantified in the sense of weighed and measure as we conventionally weigh and measure things. And puja is the illustration of that. Pakru Samai says the reason our school has lasted 1,000 years is because we do this. Not because we're good at forward bends. Not because we know how to move the body artfully and gracefully in a dance-like fashion. That's not why the clinics and hospitals and practices of this last 1,000 years. So the reason it's lasted 1,000 years is because of puja. Now I said puja is defined as prayer, okay? But actually there is no exact English translation of the word puja. Puja is a Sanskrit word, and puja is a Pali language word. There is no exact English translation of that concept, whatever that is, puja. So, but there are 5 that are closer than others. There are actually 64 different ways to define the word puja literally in the English language. 64. Most people know 1. Most yoga teachers might know 1. There are 64 literal translations. I deal generally with 5. Okay? So the first thing I want to translate the word puja into is process. The English word process. Okay, what is a process? Somebody tell me, what is a process? What's the definition of the word process? Speak up.
An orderly way of accomplishing something.
Okay, an orderly way of accomplishing something. Can anyone else give me enlightenment as to what the word process means? You've heard of it before, right? So what do you think the word means?
Methodical movement from one point to another.
How about let's say it a different way? I'll give you help, okay? The word process is slang, colloquial expression of the word process. To process, okay? Well, it means to start here and go there. A procession, processional, these all have the same root. It means you start here and go there. What's a processional? What's a wedding processional? You start in the back, you walk to the front. That's the processional. And when you're married, you walk from the front to the back. That's also part of the processional. Do you get it? All right. I'm going to make a cup of tea. The process of bringing water to a boil by way of heating it, however you do it, burning coal, stick, wood fire, gas stove, electric stove, propane, whatever you do, heating the water to bring it to a higher temperature, having prepared or processed herbs or plants, which we would refer to generically as tea. In other words, you got to get the tea leaves. Has anybody here ever picked tea? I pick tea. Noise pick tea. No, you don't, just stop. So, I have done this thing where you go out into the woods, you pick the green tea, the white tea, that's the fresh shoots on the green tea, on the mature plants, right? The new ones, the new leaves. You pick a handful or two of those, then you go back to your hut in the village and you make a fire with charcoal and you get a good fire going. Then you have a black pot. It used to be metal, shiny, but now it's not. Now it's black, jet black, thick coated carbon on the outside, this thick, because no one ever washes the outside of a pot. Why would you do that? It's ridiculous. You're just going to put it back in the fire. So the only part of the pot that's ever cleaned is the inside. And then you fill it with water, which you got out of the stream, which you want to boil anyway, because there's buffaloes there, and buffaloes pee in the stream, and there's leeches in the stream. So thank God for tea, we're going to boil the water. So you get the water from the stream, you put it in the pot, you get the handful of herbs that you got and you throw them in the pot and you boil the heck out of them. And then you have a bamboo strainer that the person you're with made for their tea, right? And you pour out of the bucket, out of the pot. Sometimes they even look like a teapot. Sometimes not, right? And as you pour it through the bamboo strainer, it strains out most of the leaves, not all of them. You always get leaves in your teeth, okay? And then you let it sit until it's not boiling anymore so it doesn't hurt you. And then you drink it. And so from the first idea of walking into the woods to collect the green tea leaves off of the plants. And by the way, tea farms in Thailand are permaculture. You know what? Thai farmers think they invented it. Because you can be in a tea farm and not know it. Because maybe you're attracted to the longan, or maybe you're attracted to the mungkut, or maybe you're attracted to the jackfruit, or maybe you're attracted to, you know, the 100 other things that are there, and the tea plants are what grows in the undergrowth in the whole farm, okay? So from the first thought to go out, to get the tea, to bring it back, to get the pot, to get water in the pot, to start a fire, to boil the water, to put the tea into the pot, to strain it into the cup, and they don't know how to make teacups in Thailand. I mean, they think they invented it, but honestly, they don't know how to make teacups because they just give you this ceramic thing with no handle, which always burns your fingers. Right? There's no handle. What's up with that? Why do teacups not have handles? They'll hand you a hot teacup that you can't hold because it's so hot and there's no handle. So anyway, you have then to let it sit until you don't do harm to yourself, enjoying the health benefits of white tea, which is unmature green tea, okay? And then you drink the tea. First gulp gets into your gullet, makes its way past your taste buds, into the gullet. It's a technical term. Okay? That is a process. Now, if I'm a tea drinker or a tea maker, and in fact, some people do what they call tea ceremony. Even in Thailand, they do tea ceremony. And they do, it's very elaborate. There's only one way to do it right. You got to turn the cup, and you got to whisk the ground tea, right? You know every step of the process backwards and forwards, and you know the difficulties, pros and cons of what will occur every step of the way, and you know where the tricky bits are. You can anticipate them ahead of time, and you know what the final result is supposed to look like, or taste like, or smell like, or the final step is not. This final step is the umami, enjoyment of what happens when that fresh green tea, the first bit of that fresh green tea, lands on your tongue and your mouth, and you have an emotional realization of truth that somehow you and tea are related. And the world is a better place because of that relationship. Puja is a process. So we know that we need spiritual help. We know that we need elevation. We know that we need energy assistance. We know that we need to connect with the person that we're in a relationship with for healing. And this is a way to do it and get to it every time in a good way and come out in a good way. The 5 steps in this process are acknowledge the space. Number 1, the mat. The 4 corners of this mat are sacred space. Outside the mat is outside the mat. I can play out here. I can go over here and I can kick this girl. I can kick her, and that's okay. It's not a problem. Okay, but the second I'm on the mat, I am now a sacred being in a sacred space, and I have been given instructions to behave myself. Don't be stupid, dumb, or ugly. In other words, out here, stupid, dumb, and ugly is not good, but it's okay. You can get away with it. You can gamble, you can smoke, you can drink alcohol, you can, kick your dog, you can what? But the second you cross this line, the demarcation of the 4 corners of this mat, all that is over, because you are not that person over here. You are a sacred being, and you are representing infinite love. Now, the first temples, the first Buddhist temples were 4 rocks, 4 stones, ordinary field stones, where the monks went to a place and they declared this space sacred. Yeah, right here, sacred. And let's put a corner on the northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast, exactly aligned according to the cardinal directions. And outside of these 4 stones with an imaginary line is the world. And inside the 4 corners of these 4 stones is the temple, the Wat. Wat, W-A-T, the Wat, the temple. And outside you can be any way you want to. If you act that way, inside, cross that line, that's bad. And we will stop you. We'll stop you, whatever it takes. Inside we meditate, outside we live. Inside we meditate, outside we live. Got it? Inside we pray, outside we're the result of the prayer. Inside cause, outside action. Inside generative, original causation, origin of karma. Outside expression, recipient, manifestation of karma. That was a concept. And initially, the way that they did the mind game of tricking people into thinking differently, so you got to trick the mind. Mind thinks it's in charge. According to Ayurveda, the mind is not in charge. According to Ayurveda, the mind is an organ just like every other organ. You don't want your kidneys telling you what to do all day, do you? Actually, if they do, you're not going to be happy with that because they're just going to want to pee. How about that? If your whole life was just about, I got to pee, morning to night. There are people whose kidneys rule their life. It's not comfortable. It's not fun. Okay? So you want the mind to have a job, but you don't want it to be exclusively in control. Why? Because it's often prone to flights of fancy and imagination and optical illusion and mirages and so on. There are things about the mind that just don't really work all that well all the time. So they came up with a way to trick the mind to think differently in a certain time, in a certain place. I want you to think differently about who you are right now. Right here, right now. And this imaginary line and these four corners are going to help me do that. Then eventually they got really bright because there's always some artistic person, probably a woman. It's always some artistic person who came up with the crazy idea, let's carve the stones into the shape of a leaf. Because the Buddha got enlightened under the Bodhi tree. The Buddha's tree, the Bodhi tree. That's why it's called the Bodhi tree. And it has a very specific shaped leaf with a little point. Wide base, triangle, and comes to a little point. So they came up with, since the Buddha was enlightened under the Bodhi tree, even though we don't have a Bodhi tree, let's make the four corners Bodhi leaves. And they started carving the stones in the Bodhi leaves. So there's another 400 or 500 years that the only way you know it was a Buddhist temple is you're walking in the woods and you find a stone carved in the shape of a leaf. And then if you don't even have to look for the other stones, you just find that one stone, get your compass out, and then walk due north or due west from that stone. And eventually, guess what? You find another one. And if you turn it right angles to that stone, even if it's completely forested, Indiana Jones styles I'm talking about, and start walking exactly north from that stone, guess what? Eventually, you come to another stone. Because for 500 years, that was a temple. They marked it, first it was just stones. Looks like a rock, but sometimes people would say, well, I thought that was just the other rock like the other one. This is a field stone. And then they started carving them, so people would say, well, you can't mistake it because it's carved in the shape of a leaf. And then guess what they did? They built a wall between the stones. A lintel that you had to step over. Because they found out that sometimes people drag their feet when they come in the temple, and which means they're not very aware and they're not very conscious and they're not really leaving the outside and creating the new on the inside. So they came up with the idea, how about this? Let's put a row of stones 11 inches high between the marker stones so that when you come in the temple, you got to actually step over it to get into the inside. And that was like gangbusters. That was really popular. The Buddhist architects lost their mind, and they had a whole generation of people that would just tell you how to stack up stones to make the lintels, to make the border more profound. But eventually, the walls got higher, and eventually they put roofs over the walls, and temples become temples. This is the temple, but your body is the temple. See, Thai temples have this construction. There is an outer courtyard that is still part of the temple. It's still the Wat. And then inside the Wat is a building called the Bat. So out here is the world. In here is sacred. But this is sacred, sacred. You know, sacred with a little plus sign. And in the back of this Bat is another part of the temple, which is verboten. It's like our gang, 1930s treehouse, no girls allowed. Because only monks. You have to be an ordained monk to go into that part of the temple. No exception, that's it, right? Front part, monks and nuns, and the public on good behavior. Outside good behavior, anybody. And outside of that wall, we don't care. We don't care. All right. if you look at the oldest models, geometries of the earliest temples, they are shaped like a human being. So the oldest form of temples is actually, the temple structure, architecture, is a likeness of the human body. So it actually has a torso, it actually has legs and feet, it actually has a head, and it has a geometric orientation to the cardinal directions. So it's not just a body, it's a body lying north, south, east, west, or whatever it is for that particular temple. And so the idea was that the mat, which in traditional Thai, the mat was in a little building inside the temple over here, it'd be right over here, a little building, which is like a gazebo, which has no walls, has a raised floor, has a roof, is shady, has no walls, and that was called sala. Sala, okay? Another term for sala is massage pavilion. Every temple from the oldest times had a designated area for the practice of medicine. The Buddha ordered that himself. In the Mahapanasa diaries of the Buddha, in the Buddha's own diaries that he wrote, he ordered every temple, every gathering of his followers to have a designated area to practice medicine on each other. And he ordered that the community was responsible for their health. Okay? So the sala is like these rugs. And then there's the mat, which is just to make it more comfortable. This could be concrete, could be wood, could be, floors, whatever it is. And then you are the inner sanctum. The client is the innermost part of that temple. All right? So in most bodywork systems, there's no acknowledgement of this. We call it acknowledge the space. People might say, well, treat people with respect and, ask permission and so on. But it seems to me to be more of an affectation, because I have both received paid massages and I have witnessed other people do paid massages where they never asked permission for anything. They just went at it. They just went at it. It's like, I know why you're here, you know why I'm here, let's get to it. There are actually massage businesses that forbid you on the penalty of, are we getting a sound over there? Is it showing? Okay. That forbid you from even giving your clients your name or asking their name. You're not even supposed to ask your client your name. Okay. In fact, the largest employer of massage therapists in the US, that is their policy. First names only, and nicknames for therapists. You don't even give your clients your real name ever. You can be fired for telling your boss, or telling your client, who's your boss, in my opinion, telling the client your real name, or asking their last name, or asking for any personal information at all. You can be fired for that. Largest single employer, corporate employer of massage people in the country. I get a lot of their former employees come in this class, okay? So here I am. Acknowledge the space. You know what acknowledge means? Think the thought. So in our philosophy, we believe that part of the way to guarantee that healing occurs is that you have to become the embodiment of that hollow tube. And part of the way that you become the embodiment of the hollow tube, part of the discipline is that you can change your mind on a dime. In other words, I could be thinking one way in 1 minute, and I can tell myself to not do that anymore and think a completely different way, like snapping my fingers anytime I need to do it. That's discipline in practice, because most people can't do that. Right? And so then what happens is, I come here and I acknowledge the space. This is sacred space, so she's sacred. I'm going to be sacred in this space. And because I have that thought, I act differently. Now, it might not be something that you can see, but there's something intrinsically different because I took the time to think the thought of acknowledging the sacredness of what I'm going to do. All right, the second thing I do is seek refuge. We call this Wai Kru. Now, literally, I'm Kru. Literally, Pa Kru, Samai is Kru. His teacher's Kru. And basically, this is visualize our lineage, because what we're doing is not new. Okay? If you take two mirrors and hold those mirrors up close to each other, and then you tilt them so you can look in one mirror, you will see an infinitely repeating circuit of mirrors going off to your left. And then if you turn and look at the other mirror, you'll see an infinitely repeating circuit of mirrors going off to your right, and you're in the middle. So on the left hand is all the generations of healers and people in our lineage that have come before us. And here I am in the middle now. I'm in this moment. And then in the future is all the future iterations of healing and healers that will come after me because I was here. And that's our lineage. That's called the infinite visualization. Tibetans call it the holographic visualization. Don't just visualize the Buddha, visualize 100 Buddhas. Don't just visualize 100 Buddhas, visualize 100 Buddhas in a cube that's 100 Buddhas wide and 100 Buddhas tall. And then don't just visualize that cube. Now take 100 of those cubes and visualize 100 of those cubes across and high and wide and deep. And don't just visualize that. Take 100 of those and visualize that. And take 100 of those and visualize that. And now you're starting to get there. Because there's a Buddha in every cell. There's an entity of consciousness in every cell. There is an essence of sacred being, of sacred consciousness, of sentience in every cell. And with the right practice, you can see it. And if you could see it for a minute, in the next minute, you would not be the person you were the minute before. That's what the teaching says. The Bardo Thodol, Tibetan Book of the Dead, says if you can just hear the truth, expressed in a way that you get it, like Grok in Stranger in a Strange Land, that in the very next moment, you're not the same person that you were the moment before. And this is a process of enlightenment. Every moment, you're not the same person you were the minute before. 10 minutes after that, 10 conscious interventions after that, you're 10 times not the person that you were 10 times ago. And in a few minutes, in a few days, in a few years, you are now a self-realized conscious being. You're not Joe. You're not who you were. You're who you are. Actually, latently who you were from the beginning. But
ยามเหงาเราถอนใจเมื่อมองดูสา